My wife cheated with her ex, so I collected proof and took control of our business and my life. Trust is a fragile thing. Takes years to build, but only moments to shatter. That was the bitter truth I faced when I discovered that my wife, the woman I had built my life with, had been unfaithful to me. The worst part? She had rekindled a relationship with her ex, the one man I thought she had put behind her. But I was not about to let betrayal destroy me. I had built a life with her, and I was not going to lose everything without a fight. I started collecting proof quietly, methodically. Every text, every suspicious meeting, every detail I could gather, I kept in my pocket, knowing that the truth would be my weapon. As the evidence piled up, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time to take control. Not just of our marriage, but of our business and my life. What came next was a series of steps that left her speechless, and my world completely redefined. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into power. I always thought that the foundation of a successful marriage was trust. My wife and I had built our relationship on that very foundation. For over a decade, we had been partners in every sense of the word. Together, we achieved so much. Building a thriving business from scratch, buying a beautiful house, and starting a family. We seemed like the perfect couple, admired by friends and colleagues. Our life appeared as flawless as the images we posted on social media. But, as I would come to realize, appearances can be deceiving. When we first met, she was recovering from a breakup with her ex. He had been a significant part of her life for years, but I was confident that their relationship was behind her. She had told me that she had moved on, and I had no reason to doubt it. We spent our days working on our shared goals and our nights creating memories. Her ex seemed like nothing more than a distant part of her past. She never spoke about him often, and I believed that was a good sign. He was just a chapter that had closed, and I was now the main character in her life story. Our business became the center of our world. What started as a modest venture soon blossomed into a well-established company. It was a joint effort. Our sweat and tears went into it, and it gave us a sense of pride. But the long hours began to take their toll on both of us. We worked side by side, day in and day out, with no room for distractions or doubts. I thought that the close quarters and constant communication would keep us connected. I believed we were stronger than any external pressure. But over time, I began to notice subtle changes. Little things that, in hindsight, should have raised red flags. She seemed distracted more often, distant when we were together. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but the small, quiet signs became impossible to ignore. I convinced myself that it was just the weight of our growing business causing her stress. But I could no longer deny it. The emotional distance between us was growing, and it wasn't just from the stress of work. I did not want to believe that something might be wrong with our relationship. But then came the late-night phone calls. She would always step outside to take them, a smile on her face as she reassured me that it was just a business matter or a conversation with an old friend. But I could sense there was more. The change in tone, the secrecy, it all felt off. I knew I had to trust my instincts. I tried to push away my suspicions, but as I would soon learn, the truth was right in front of me, waiting to be uncovered. At first, everything seemed normal. We continued to run our business together, maintaining a facade of happiness. But as the months went by, I couldn't ignore the strange occurrences anymore. Her late nights, the mysterious phone calls, and the way she'd become defensive when I asked her about her day. I didn't want to overstep, but my instincts told me something wasn't right. One evening, I decided to check her phone. I had never invaded her privacy before, but something inside me told me I had to see for myself. She had fallen asleep on the couch, her phone resting beside her. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up and unlocked it with the password she had never bothered to change. What I found was worse than I could have ever imagined. The texts from her ex were not innocent or casual. They were filled with affectionate words, personal jokes, and references to shared memories. My heart sank as I read through the messages. Messages that seemed far too familiar and intimate for something that was supposedly in the past. She had told me that their relationship was over, that he was just someone she had once known. But this was more than that. The messages became more frequent. Texts during the day, late-night conversations that lasted for hours. It was as if their past had never really ended. As I read through them, a sickening realization hit me. My wife had rekindled something with her ex, something she had hidden from me for a long time. The trust one had in her shattered in an instant. The next morning, I confronted her. She denied everything, of course. She assured me that the messages were harmless, that they were just friendly chats with someone from her past. But I could see the lie in her eyes, the hesitation in her voice. It was then that I knew I had to take control of this situation. I began gathering evidence quietly and carefully. Every text, every phone call, every suspicious moment, I recorded. I knew that the truth was my weapon, and I would use it to take back control. Not just of my marriage, but of my life. I would not let betrayal destroy me. The days that followed my discovery were a blur. I felt like I was walking through a fog, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My mind raced as I struggled to make sense of what I had uncovered. The evidence was irrefutable, but there was still a part of me that wished I was wrong, that I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. My wife was cheating on me, and not just with anyone. She had rekindled a relationship with her ex, someone I had trusted her with, someone I believed she had left behind years ago. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and completely powerless. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built a life with, had turned out to be someone completely different. In the beginning, I tried to confront her, but she was good at hiding the truth. She claimed that the messages were just a form of nostalgia, that nothing had actually happened between them. She insisted that they were just old friends catching up, and that there was no reason to worry. But the longer I listened to her excuses, the clearer it became that she was lying to me. The affection in her texts, the way they spoke to each other, told a different story. It was more than just friendship. It was betrayal. I didn't want to accept it, but I knew I had no choice. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust that had been broken. It was about the life we had built together, the foundation of which had been shattered by one simple act of dishonesty. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Anger that I had been deceived. Anger that she had gone behind my back for so long. And anger that I had allowed myself to be blind to it all. It was in that anger that I found clarity. I knew that I had to take control of the situation, not just for my own peace of mind, but for the sake of my children and the business we had built together. There was no way I was going to let this betrayal define me. I had worked too hard to let it all slip away. The first step was collecting evidence. I began documenting everything, the texts, the phone calls, even the late-night meetings that she had with her ex. I knew that the best way to confront her was with undeniable proof. I couldn't just rely on my gut feelings anymore. I had to be sure. The more I dug, the more the pieces fell into place. There were times when I would come home late from the office, only to find her phone buzzing with messages from him. Or when I would catch her in a lie trying to cover up her actions. The small inconsistencies began to add up, and I knew there was no going back. But there was one moment that stood out above the rest. One moment that made everything real. It was a night when I was going through her phone once more, looking for anything I might have missed. I had always respected her privacy, but this time, I had no choice. The messages were pouring in again, and as I read them, I found a picture attached. A picture of her ex, standing with her, their arms around each other, smiling as if nothing had changed. The picture was taken just days before, and it was clear from their expressions that they were not just friends. They were still involved, still entangled in something I could no longer deny. My heart sank. I was no longer just hurt. I was broken. The man I had trusted, the one I had believed to be a part of our past, was now the person who had destroyed everything I had worked for. In that moment, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The business, the house, everything I had worked so hard to build, was now in jeopardy because of her actions. But I had a plan. I would no longer let her dictate my life. I started working behind the scenes, gathering all the evidence I could find. I began making copies of every piece of proof that showed her betrayal. I hired a lawyer to help me navigate the legal side of things. I knew that I had the upper hand now. I had the proof, the evidence that would make her realize that I wasn't someone she could manipulate. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about taking back control of my life. The more I uncovered, the more my determination grew. I had never been one to back down from a challenge, and this was no exception. I had to be strategic. I couldn't let my emotions take control, no matter how much they burned inside me. This was about securing my future, my children's future, and my peace of mind. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The discovery of her affair became the catalyst for everything that followed. I realized that I had been living in a lie, but now that the truth was out, I was ready to rebuild. I was ready to take back control of everything that mattered. My business, my family, my life. And I would not stop until I had done so. The day of revelation came sooner than I had expected. My heart pounded as I prepared to confront my wife. The evidence was undeniable, but I knew that presenting it to her would be a turning point. It was no longer about seeking closure or understanding. It was about making her face the reality of what she had done, and what she had cost me. I had planned everything carefully. I waited for the right moment, when we were both at home, when the kids were at school, and when there were no distractions. I knew that if I allowed this conversation to spiral out of control, there would be no going back. I couldn't afford to be weak. I couldn't afford to back down. The moment she walked through the door, I could see something in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the realization that her life was about to change forever. She knew something was wrong. I could feel the tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked at me, her face pale, her eyes shifting nervously. She knew what was coming, but she couldn't escape it. "What is it?" she asked, trying to hide her anxiety. But I could see it in the way her fingers fidgeted and how she avoided eye contact. It was as if she already knew that the truth was about to be exposed, but she was still trying to hold on to the last threads of the life we had built together. "I know about you and him," I said. The words felt cold in the air, hanging between us like a dagger waiting to strike. She froze. I could see her body tense, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. For a brief moment, she stood there in complete silence, her eyes wide with shock. I watched as she tried to compose herself, to find a way to deny it, to deflect the accusations, but I wasn't about to let her do that. I had spent weeks gathering proof, and now I was going to lay it all bare. I reached for my phone and pulled up the messages, the photos, the receipts of everything I had uncovered. I handed it to her without a word, watching her face as she slowly began to scroll through the evidence. It was in that moment that I saw her true reaction. The mask she had been wearing for months, maybe even years, began to crack. She could no longer deny the truth. The smile she had once worn, the false reassurances, the lies she had fed me, they all disappeared in an instant. Her face paled even more, and she looked as if she had seen a ghost. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice trembling, but there was no denying it now. She had been caught, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. "You don't have to say anything," I replied coldly. "The truth is already out." She looked at the phone one last time, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through the images of her and her ex, smiling together, holding each other as if they had never been apart. I could see the weight of it hitting her. It wasn't just that she had cheated on me. It was the realization that I was no longer the man she could manipulate. The evidence spoke for itself, and there was no escaping it. The silence in the room felt suffocating. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she remained silent. I could see the guilt eating away at her, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. "I'm done," I said, my voice filled with finality. "You've betrayed me in every way possible, and I'm not going to stand by and let you destroy everything I've worked for. I'm taking control of my life now, starting with the business and the house. You can have nothing." Her face twisted with disbelief. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You've ruined everything," I said. "The trust we had, the life we built. It's all gone. And now you're going to pay the price for it. I'm not giving you the luxury of playing the victim. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." She tried to argue, to beg for forgiveness, but it was too late. The damage was done. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. She had no ground to stand on anymore. The affair wasn't just a betrayal. It was a betrayal of everything we had ever shared. The life we had built together, the business we had worked so hard to establish, had been shattered by her lies. "I'll take the kids," I said firmly. "You're not fit to raise them anymore. I can't trust you, and I won't let you hurt them." She looked at me, her eyes welling up with tears, but it didn't affect me. There was no room for pity, no room for sympathy. I had been through too much to feel sorry for her. The damage she had caused went beyond just me. It affected our children, our future, and the very foundation of everything we had worked for. "I'll fight you for them," she said through gritted teeth, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew deep down that she had lost. She had no leverage, no standing. The business, the house, and the children, everything that had once been shared between us, was now in my hands. The confrontation ended with her leaving the room in tears, but the weight of it all didn't hit me until later. I had just taken control of my life. I had stripped away the layers of deceit and dishonesty, and in doing so I had reclaimed my power. But I wasn't done. The revelation was only the beginning. Now I had to rebuild. I had to stand firm in my decision and ensure that I could move forward with my life. And I would do so with strength, determination, and a newfound sense of purpose. The days that followed were a blur. The weight of the decision I had made, the one that had been lingering in the back of my mind for so long, finally settled upon me. There was no turning back now, and although I felt a strange sense of liberation, there was also a deep emptiness. I had lost the person I thought I would grow old with. I had lost the life we had built together. But I had also gained control over my own destiny, and that was something I could no longer ignore. The immediate aftermath was intense. The house felt colder without her, but it was also quieter, less filled with tension. I focused on what mattered most. My kids. They were hurting, of course. They had seen the cracks in our relationship long before I had. But I wasn't going to let them suffer because of her mistakes. I spent every moment I could with them, doing my best to provide the stability they needed in the midst of the chaos. I filed for divorce immediately. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, My lawyer worked fast to ensure everything was documented, and I made sure that the business we had worked on together would be under my control from now on. She would have nothing. I wasn't going to let her take any part of what I had earned, what I had built. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about making sure she could no longer manipulate the situation. But then came the part one hadn't prepared for, the public exposure. It wasn't my first instinct to reveal everything to the world. I had kept my business, my private life, protected for years. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that silence wasn't going to do anyone any favors. She had betrayed me publicly, and now it was time for the truth to come out. I took to social media. I posted everything. The texts, the photos, the messages, the entire story. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because the truth deserved to be known. I owed it to myself and to the people around me to stand up for what was right. The post went viral almost immediately. Messages flooded in from people I had known, from strangers, and from those who had been following my journey without my knowledge. It was overwhelming, but the sense of relief I felt was indescribable. The burden I had carried for so long had been lifted. The backlash she faced was swift. People were shocked, confused, and disgusted by what had happened. Her ex's public persona took a hit too. The TV actor she had cheated with was no longer the darling of the media. He was just another man who had contributed to the wreckage of a family. It was a slow but inevitable fall from grace for both of them. They were no longer the perfect couple. No one cared to romanticize their affair. The world had moved on to the next scandal, but for me the battle was far from over. While my ex-wife's world was crumbling, mine was slowly starting to rebuild. I threw myself into the business, taking it to new heights. I worked harder than I ever had before, not out of spite, but out of a desire to prove to myself that I could succeed without her. Every decision I made was deliberate, every move strategic. I wanted to make sure that not only would I survive this, I would thrive. I could never go back to the man I was before. The betrayal had changed me, but it had also empowered me to become the version of myself I had always wanted to be. I took my kids on more trips, spent quality time with them, and made sure they knew how loved they were. They were my priority now, and I poured everything I had into giving them the stability and security they deserved. They had witnessed the breakdown of our family, and I owed it to them to show them that even when life is broken, it can still be rebuilt. My ex-wife, on the other hand, struggled to adapt to her new life. She lost her position in the business, her reputation was tarnished, and her relationship with the kids suffered. She tried to make contact with me on several occasions, but I didn't want anything to do with her. I refused to let her manipulate me again. I had taken back control, and I wasn't going to let her have even an ounce of power over my life. In the courtroom, the divorce was finalized without much resistance. The judge awarded me full custody of the children, and I received the house, the business, and all assets tied to them. It was a painful victory, knowing what had to be done, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I moved on. I began to heal. The scars from the betrayal would always be there, but they didn't define me. I no longer saw myself as the man who had been deceived. I saw myself as the man who took control of his life. I had the strength to rebuild, to protect my family, and to create a new future. The road to recovery was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned everything, moments when I wondered if I would ever be able to fully trust again. But each day I grew stronger. I had learned the hard way that life does not always go as planned, but it was still worth living. And now I was living for myself, for my children, and for the future we would create together. The old chapter was closed, and a new one had begun. After everything that had happened, the dust began to settle. It was not easy, but I had come out stronger, wiser, and more resolute than ever before. I had learned the hard way that no matter how deeply we invest in someone or something, we are still responsible for our own happiness and peace. My journey was far from over, but it was now my own path, one where I had reclaimed my dignity, my business, and my family. As I moved forward, I knew that the scars would remain, but they would never define me. I would keep building, keep growing, and keep being the father my kids needed. My ex-wife's life spiraled downward, and while part of me felt a fleeting sense of satisfaction from the exposure and the consequences she faced, I was not focused on her anymore. I was focused on me, on what I had achieved, and on what I would continue to build. I had the power to shape my own future, and no one could take that away from me. If you found this journey of resilience and recovery inspiring, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and press the bell icon for more stories like this.